Overseas now to breaking news where investigators say at least 10 people have been killed in a school shooting at a school in central Sweden.
Now, this happened at a campus located about 125 miles west of Stockholm that serves adults, including immigrants and people with disabilities. Police say they believe that the suspected shooter, they are looking now for a motive. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now. Matt, what do we know about the specifics of the attack and the alleged shooter that police believe that they have in custody?
Well, yeah, the Swedish investigators are kind of keeping this close to their chest. We don't actually know a lot about how this shooting happened. We know, as you said, that 10 people were killed. The Swedish police haven't even released the number of people who were injured. So that's still among the outstanding questions here after this tragedy. Now, this is very rare in Sweden, of course, because they have tight gun laws. Guns are very restricted. There aren't that many people who have access to firearms like this one. But this is still going to be very, very startling for this entire country. This happened, as you mentioned, at an adult education center. And there were actually, according to people who were at the center speaking to Swedish news agencies, there weren't as many students as had been expected because there had just been national exams. So there actually weren't that many people there. Now, another big outstanding question here, guys, is whether or not, and we've heard conflicting reports on whether or not the gunman is among the dead. Earlier reports said he had committed suicide.
Matt, we understand this is a breaking news story, but police are saying at least 10 people were killed. Do you know anything more about the victims? You did mention this was an adult school.
That's right. So this was a school that was for people who were almost entirely over the age of 20 years old and offered kind of continuing education for adults, mostly adults who hadn't passed earlier grades of school. So there were not, as far as we know, even though this was a school, many children who were on site. That's kind of unlikely given the type of people who attended this school. But this is still something where, you know, we don't know whether there was either more than one gun person or whether there was just one. We don't know whether this person was inspired by a certain ideology. So it's hard to say exactly what happened here. And that's a lot of the questions I think that are going to be answered probably in the coming hours.
All right, Matt Bradley with the very latest on the school shooting in Sweden.
There are over 4 billion iPhone users across the globe who pride themselves on the safety that Apple provides. The tech giant has strict digital rules in place for its App Store, but this safety net is being questioned in Europe. Usually, smartphone users cannot access porn via App Store, but when it comes to Europe, the rules have changed. Apple has called a pornography app available for iPhones in the European Union a danger to children. The App Store does not allow porn, but the Hot Tub app is offered on AllStore Pal, one such alternative marketplace in Europe. AllStore billed Top Tub as the first Apple-approved porn app in a post on Monday on social media platform X. The app made it through an Apple review process for security and functionality. However, the tech giant does not approve of the app. It expressed its concerns, saying the app creates safety risks for EU users, especially kids. Last year, Apple became the first ever tech firm to face accusations of breaching a new EU law known as the Digital Markets Act. It promised changes to comply with the DMA, including allowing developers in the EU to use alternative app marketplaces. AllStore Pal is one such alternative, which was launched last year. Apple has long argued that allowing side loading of apps onto iPhones or iPads from places other than the App Store brings with it the risks of deceptive, dangerous, and dubious digital content.
En kille bredvid mig, han fick skjuta här i axel. Så han blodade så mycket när jag tittade bakom mig, så det var 3 personer på golvet som svimmar och blodar. Men alla var chockade. Alla säger bara gå ut, gå ut. Så jag och min kompis vi drar den personen och försöka rädda livet. Så det var tråkigt för att folket blir väldigt chockad. Och polisen var inte på plats, inte ambulansen. Så vi som hjälpte till att jag drar hennes själ till min kompis och drar hårt på Axel för att han blöder inte så mycket.
Vi har idag sett ett brutalt dödligt våld mot helt oskyldiga människor. Det här är den värsta massskjutningen i svensk historia.
Ja, det är ju läskigt.
Scientists have sounded the alarm as H5N1 bird flu has increasingly shown disturbing signs of adaptation. With 68 North Americans infected and 1 death already recorded, the virus is defying traditional transmission patterns and the spectre of an airborne pathogen is looming large, putting the public health system at a risk. Next report telling you more.
The world came to a grinding halt. Bustling cities wore a deserted look. The world learned a painful lesson in 2020. When COVID-19 spread silently for months before the WHO confirmed that it was airborne. More than 7 million people died. Scientists fear history could repeat itself, this time with a far deadlier virus. The US Centers for Disease Control has tracked dozens of human infections linked to dairy farms. The virus jumps from animals to people, likely through contaminated droplets from milking machinery. But what if it mutates to travel through the air? Some flu strains have already shown that they can survive in tiny airborne droplets. If H5N1 follows suit, the virus could drift unseen through hospitals, restaurants, and crowded spaces. Inhalation alone would be enough to spread it. Certain mutations might even help it latch onto human respiratory cells, just as seasonal flu does. Tracking flu outbreaks is already difficult, with 1 billion cases of seasonal flu each year. If bird flu becomes airborne, containment could be near impossible. The prospects of an airborne H5N1 variant presents a frightening scenario for global public health. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now, for years, Saudi Arabia has been the home to a large number of foreign workers. Many of them are employed in the country's booming construction, hospitality and service sectors. However, in recent weeks, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's government has increasingly moved to tighten control over illegal migrants. As a part of the Vision 2030 plan, which aims to reduce the Gulf Kingdom's dependency on oil and improve opportunities for locals, foreign workers are facing harsher scrutiny. Saudi authorities have ramped up enforcement of strict residency, labor and border security laws. They have launched coordinated operations across the country. In one major raid, over 21,000 offenders were arrested recently, and among these 21,000, 14,000 of them were detained for violations related to their residency status. 4,600 were arrested for border security crimes and over 3,000 for labor law violations. Other offenders who were held had either overstayed their visa, illegally entered the country, or were working without the required permits. Now, according to the Saudi's Interior Ministry, at least 10,000 foreigners have also been deported last week. Saudi's government data showed 2,300 were in the final stages of the deportation process, while 27,000 have been sent to their diplomatic missions to arrange their travel documents. The crackdown is not only on deportation. Look at these numbers. Nearly 1,500 people attempting to enter Saudi illegally, too, were arrested, with the majority coming from Yemen and Ethiopia. On the flip side, 90 individuals were held for trying to leave the country unlawfully. Now, these stringent measures reflect Saudi's broader goals of transforming the country. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman believes that these are essential for his country's long-term economic goals. This overhaul is designed to aid Saudi's locals, especially in sectors that are saturated with foreign workers. At the heart of this crackdown is Saudi's government's bid to create a more orderly and regulated environment. Mohammed bin Salman's regime is trying to create a balance between the need for foreign labor and giving more opportunities to its citizens. Saudi officials have issued a warning for offenders. Those found guilty could face jail terms of up to 15 years. And face fines of nearly $275,000. Over half of Saudi Arabia's workforce is made up of migrant workers, and the top nationalities of these people belong from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, and Ethiopia. How these workers adapt to the new laws and how the oil-rich kingdom handles their concerns will play a crucial role in the success of Mohammed bin Salman's ambitious reforms.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan welcoming his Egyptian counterpart Bader Abdelati in Ankara on Tuesday. The two men discussed trade and investment ties, but also spoke about regional security issues, in particular Gaza. Fidan said Turkey strongly opposes US President Donald Trump's idea of relocating Palestinians from the enclave to Egypt and Jordan. The Palestinian problem started with the displacement of the Palestinians. We defend the idea that in order to solve this problem permanently, Palestinians should be granted the right to a state on their land and that this conflict and dispute should be ended with a two-state solution. Coming up with another proposal to the contrary actually means not reading history well. Fidan also expressed his concerns that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu might restart the war in Gaza after the release of the Israeli hostages. He also said Turkey has accepted 15 Palestinian prisoners who were released and deported as part of the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel.
Syria's transitional leader Ahmed al-Shara arrived in Turkey on Tuesday as he seeks to burnish his legitimacy on the international stage. The former rebel leader, who declared himself Syria's interim president last week, was warmly received by President Tayyip Erdogan. Al-Shara's success in the lightning advance that overthrew dictator Bashar al-Assad was aided by Turkey. which backed anti-Assad forces during Syria's 13-year civil war. His visit to Turkey aims, in large part, to restore trade between the neighbors, which is already surging. Turkish Exporters Assembly data show exports to Syria rose 20% in December, when Assad was overthrown, and jumped by more than 38% in January. But it's about diplomacy as well as trade. This is Ashara's second foreign visit since seizing power. On Sunday, he met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. He's also looking beyond the Middle East. Moscow this week said it was in negotiations with Damascus over Russian military bases in Syria. And in an interview with The Economist magazine, Ashara said his government aims to restore ties with the United States in the coming days. But he said he has not yet had any contact with the Trump administration. Syria is still under heavy economic sanctions from Washington. In January, the outgoing Biden administration issued a sanctions exemption for transactions with Syrian governing institutions for 6 months. One sticking point, though, could be the fate of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. The U.S. has backed the group, which was a chief fighting force in the coalition effort against Islamic State. Turkey views the People's Protection Units, a militia that spearheads the SDF, as an extension of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or YPG. The YPG has been waging an insurgency against the Turkish state since 1984 and is deemed a terrorist group by both Turkey and the U.S. And there are signs of rising tensions. A car bomb killed 20 people in the northern Syrian city of Manbij on Monday. The city changed hands a number of times. The SDF captured it from ISIS in 2016. In December, Turkish-backed rebels seized it from the SDF. There were no immediate claims of responsibility. It came just 2 days after another car bomb in the same city killed 4 people, according to Syria's state news agency.
Palestinians say that they want to go home to Gaza. President Trump has spoken about cleaning out Gaza. So what does that look like? Would there be a situation where you could forcibly remove people from Gaza?
Well, I would push back on the characterization of cleaning out Gaza. I think President Trump is looking at this from a humanitarian standpoint. You have these people that are sitting with literally thousands of unexploded ordnance in piles of rubble. At some point, we have to look realistically. How do you rebuild Gaza? What does that look like? What's the timeline? I think a lot of people were looking at very unrealistic timelines. We're talking 10, 15 years, not the 5 years. And so that is what that's what we have to work through. That's part of what we'll work through with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
To me, it is unfair to have explained to Palestinians that they might be back in 5 years. That's just preposterous.
And he's just taking a common sense approach.
Well, as to where people will go, that's a big issue, and we have to solve that. And that's what we're here to do, and that's what the president has tasked us with.
And we're looking to a number of our allies, partners in the region. We have to collectively solve this problem. Everyone's heart breaks for this war that Hamas started. And what has happened to these people that Hamas was willing to sacrifice to turn global opinion against Israel. But now we have to collectively come up with some problems, and I think the president has taken a very common sense approach.
Now, Jordan, Egypt, what other countries you think might accept Palestinians from Gaza?
Well, I think Jordan and Egypt will. I know they've spoken about it with you, and they say they're not going to accept. I say they will. But I think other countries will accept also. I think that Gaza maybe is a demolition site right now. If you look at Gaza, there's hardly a building standing, and the ones that are going to collapse. You can't live in Gaza right now, and I think we need another location. I think it should be a location that's going to make people happy. You look over the decades, it's all death in Gaza. This has been happening for years. It's all death. If we can get a beautiful area to resettle people permanently in nice homes and where they can be happy and not be shot, not be killed, not be knifed to death like what's happening in Gaza. This is a very, very difficult situation, but we're going to get it solved. I don't think people should be going back to Gaza. I think that Gaza has been very unlucky for them. They've lived like hell. They lived like you're living in hell. Gaza is not a place for people to be living. And the only reason they want to go back, and I believe this strongly, is because they have no alternative. What's the alternative? Go where? There's no other alternative. If they had an alternative, they'd much rather not go back to Gaza and live in a beautiful alternative that's safe. Yeah,
How
I'd like to
many
see it
people are you thinking about?
All of them. I mean, we're talking
All of the
about
Gazans.
probably 1.7 million people, 1.7 million, maybe 1.8 million. But I think all of them. I think they'll be resettled in areas where they can live a beautiful life and not be worried about dying every day.
You support going forward with this deal and getting all the hostages out?
I support getting all the hostages out and meeting all our war goals that include destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities and making sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again.
Are you willing?
All three.
I think that Gaza maybe is a demolition site right now. If you look at Gaza, it's all, I mean, there's hardly a building standing, and the ones that are going to collapse. You can't live in Gaza right now, and I think we need another location. I think it should be a location that's going to make people happy. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, and they're willing to supply it. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die.
Now that Iran is so weak, isn't it the right time to hit their nuclear facilities once and for all?
So you say Iran is so weak. I appreciate you saying that. They're not weak. They're very strong right now, and we're not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You know, I signed a very strong proclamation. Iran was in big trouble when I left. They were broke. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have any money for Hezbollah. You had no problem. October 7th could have never happened. When I left, October 7th could have never happened. And frankly, Russia and Ukraine, as I said, could never have happened. So I'm signing this, and I'm unhappy to do it. But I really have not so much choice, because we have to be strong and firm. And I hope that it's not going to have to be used in any great measure at all. It'd be great if we could have a Middle East and maybe a world at total peace. We don't want to be tough on Iran. We don't want to be tough on anybody, but they just can't have a nuclear weapon.
Mr. President, are you going to engage in conversations with your counterpart in Iran?
I would.
And why say that you're unhappy to sign it if it's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani?
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why. Lack of intelligence, perhaps. But he never said it.
Mr. President, when you said if they do it, they get obliterated. Just to be clear, you're talking about if Iran made an attempt on your life.
Yeah, that would be called total obliteration.